looks like a fossilized shell.
Wow!
What's up, guys? We held a competition to see if people can tell the difference between real fossils and things that just look like fossils. And to the winner of the contest, we gave a free geode from our geology station. Here we go! Wait. Aren't you gonna tell them the purpose of the competition? Oh, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Alright, story time for you. Imagine that you're out behind your grandparents' house up on their private property, and you come across something that looks like this. You pick it up, and it looks like it might have a fossil in it. It's got these squiggly lines or something, but you just can't tell for sure. Well, how do you know if it is or isn't a fossil? And that's what the competition is testing today. And after the contest, we're gonna teach you a little bit more about how to actually tell if something really is a fossil. Alright, are we good to go now? Yeah, we're good. Okay, here we go! The competition was simple. We set out a couple of tables and covered them in tablecloths. Like I said, we covered them in tablecloths. We covered them in tablecloths, just like this. Once the tablecloths were on, we lined the tables with 12 specimens, 5 of the specimens being fossils, and 7 of them being just decoys. We then asked some of our park guests to walk through and mark on a piece of paper which they thought were fossils and which were fakes. As they went, they were able to take as much time as they needed to consult with each other to try to come up with their answers.
This looks like a fossilized shell, so yeah.
I don't know. You choose on that. Not a fossil? Sounds like a deal.
What about this one? Is that a fossil or not a fossil?
Fossil.
What do you think it is? Where do you think it is?
This is a picture of all 12 specimens. Pause the video here and see if you can figure out which ones are the real fossils and which ones are just imposters. After not very long, they had all gone through and we got to work tallying the results. But before we tell you guys the results, I wanted to talk a little bit about how paleontologists, the guys that study fossils as a profession, do this exact same thing on a slightly more analytical scale. While the groups did their best during this competition to try to identify which were fossils and which were fakes, most of what they did was purely guesswork. And that's not a bad thing. Guessing is part of the scientific process. But it makes it a little easier to guess accurately if you know a little bit more about the thing that you're making a guess about. So today we're going to talk about a slightly more methodical way of identifying a fossil. First and foremost, rocks are not fossils. Most of the time when we think of fossils, we think of dinosaur bones or maybe a fossilized leaf. But the definition of a fossil is so much more broad than that. A fossil is any evidence that life was living in the distant past, which basically just means that if anything shows us that there used to be a creature alive a long time ago, then it's a fossil. An obvious example of that would be something like this trilobite here, where this little creature and this little creature were both preserved in this slab of rock right here. A less obvious example would be something like a footprint. This footprint was preserved in rock millions of years ago, but it isn't actually part of any creature's body. However, it does show us that something used to be walking around a long time ago, so it's still a fossil. Today I'd like to propose 3 different ways that we can look for those signs of ancient life when we are identifying if something is a fossil. Number 1, look for the obvious signs that something used to be alive. For example, this specimen right here. This is very obviously a fish, so this is probably a fossil. However, it's not always this easy to identify those obvious life signs. For example, we might look for something like cellular structures. All living things are made of life. All living things are made of cells. People, dinosaurs, dire wolves, plants, we've all got them. And that's actually super important when you're studying a fossil like this one. On first glance, this might not look like a fossil. In fact, it might actually look like a sedimentary rock with layers upon layers of rock that have built up over time. But those layers aren't actually layers of rocks, they're layers of algae. The way that this fossil formed is actually pretty cool. A layer of algae would grow, and then it would die, and then another layer would grow on top of that, and then it would die, and so on and so forth until you have this whole stack of all of these layers of algae. But Really, the only way that we can tell that this is algae is by looking at the specimen under a microscope. And when we do that, we can actually see the tiny microscopic cellular structures of the fossilized algae. And we used this in our competition, which was kind of mean since we didn't actually give a microscope to our contestants. But it's not always that easy to identify the obvious signs of life, especially if it doesn't look like it's a fish or if we don't have a microscope on us. So how can we identify it if it looks something like this, where there's this cool rock that has these crazy shapes on it? Maybe those are pieces of life that are stuck in this rock. Maybe it's just a wacky looking rock. How can we know for sure? Well, that takes us to our second method of fossil identification. Do you remember the specimen that we found at the beginning of the video on that hypothetical hike? This is called a dendrite, and it's one of the specimens that we used in our competition. Now, it looks sort of like there might be some kind of a plant or a fern that's been fossilized, like a leaf maybe that's stuck in this rock. But the closer you look at it, the more you realize it doesn't actually look like any plant you've ever seen before. In front of me here, I actually have an even better dendrite for you guys to look at. And if you look closely at it, you can see that the branches on it don't really have any order to them. They're just kind of doing whatever they want to. And there are some other problems with it too. Like down here, you can see that there's a double stem to it. Most plants don't have a double stem going on there. And there are other inconsistencies that make you just question, well, maybe this isn't actually a plant. How can you tell if this is or isn't evidence that this is some kind of life that was growing on here? Well, that's the second method. Life is well organized. Most of the time, if you find a fossil, you'll see some kind of mathematical symmetry or exactness to it. For example, these two actual plant fossils that I have here. This is a fossilized leaf, and this is a piece of a fossilized fern. If you look at the leaf, you can see the stem going all the way up the leaf, and then these perfectly symmetrical lines coming off of either side of that stem. On the fern, you can also see the stem running up it, and then the leaves are kind of staggered back and forth, but you can still see that pattern to them. If we look at the dendrite, you can tell that there's not really any pattern to it. It's just these crazy lines that are running off in whatever direction they want to. So if it doesn't have that mathematic order and exactness to life, then it's probably not a fossil. The only problem is that there are other things in this world that also have a mathematic exactness to them, such as the crystals on a geode. So once again, we're back to that same question. How can we know for sure if it is or isn't evidence of life? And that brings us to the third and final step of fossil identification. And unfortunately, this method is the most difficult to learn, and it takes the most time to understand. And it comes down to one word. I forgot what the word is. And it can be summarized in a single word: experience. And the best example that I have of this actually comes from an experience that I had with the head of our education department, Jeff. Story time. When I was setting up for this competition, Jeff came down and pointed at one of the specimens I had set out and was like, "That's not a fossil." And I was like, "Yeah, it's just a geode I picked up from our activities center." And he was like, "I could tell that at a glance." Jeff's been around fossils for most of his life, and at this point, he's pretty good at being able to tell if something's a fossil just by looking at it. He doesn't even really have to go through those other steps in his mind anymore. That said, it took him years to get that way, which is why experience is the most difficult method of fossil identification there is to learn. But once you've gained that experience, it's also the most useful method of fossil identification. Alright, I've kept you guys waiting long enough. Let's go see what our results from the competition were. Here's that picture again from the beginning of the video. I'm about to put the correct answers up on the screen, but if you'd like to, you can pause it again and see if you want to change any of your answers from before, now that you've learned a little bit more about fossil identification. Alright, here are the correct answers. And out of the 6 families that competed, none of them got all of these correct. There were a few that got pretty close though. One family got 8 out of the 12 right, one family got 7, a couple got 6, and then one got 5 and one got 4. But this just goes to show how difficult it can be to identify a fossil. But now that you've watched this video, hopefully you'll do a little bit better yourself the next time you're up on a hike behind your grandma's house. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, the winning family got to cut open a geode from our geology station, so once the contest was over, we took them back, they got to pick out a rock, and we chopped it open with our geode saw.
3, 2, 1.
Wow.
And And I've cut open a lot of geodes, and this was one of the nicest that I've ever seen. So sometimes it does pay off to know how to identify a fossil. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching our latest video. We hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about fossil identification so that the next time you're up at your grandma's house, you can actually tell if you found something cool. Now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell notification. And if you want to check out our newest video, you can find that right over here. We'll see you guys next time.